Sarah Mitchell woke up at 4:30 in the morning, just like she did every single day. The alarm clock buzzed loudly on her nightstand, and she reached over to turn it off before it could wake her daughter Emma in the next room. The house was dark and quiet. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, rubbing her tired eyes. Her body ached from yesterday's work, but she had no time to rest. There were bills to pay and a daughter to feed. She walked to the small bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Looking in the mirror, Sarah saw a woman who looked older than her 42 years. Her brown hair had more gray streaks now, and the lines around her eyes seemed deeper every month. But she still had the same determined look in her eyes that her late husband Tom had always loved. "You're a fighter, Sarah," he used to tell her. She needed to remember that now more than ever. Sarah got dressed quickly in her waitress uniform for Miller's Diner. The black pants and white shirt were clean but worn from too many washes. She tied her hair back in a simple ponytail and headed to the kitchen. The old farmhouse was cold in the early morning. The heater had broken last winter and Sarah couldn't afford to fix it yet. She made a pot of coffee and poured herself a large cup. The hot liquid was her only breakfast most mornings. Through the kitchen window, Sarah could see her small ranch in the dim morning light. 80 acres of land that used to be beautiful and full of life. Now it looked tired and broken, just like she felt. The barn roof had holes in it. The fences leaned to one side, held together with wire and hope. Most of the cattle were gone now, sold off one by one to pay the bills that never seemed to stop coming. 2 years ago, everything had been different. Tom had run the ranch with skill and love. They had a good herd of cattle, and the land was green and well kept. They weren't rich, but they were happy and comfortable. Then Tom got sick. Cancer, the doctor said, stage 4. It happened so fast that Sarah barely had time to understand what was happening. The medical bills came like a flood. Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Sarah watched their savings disappear in months. She sold her car and drove Tom's old truck instead. She canceled their vacation plans and stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. But the bills kept coming and Tom kept getting sicker. For 18 months, Sarah took care of her husband while he slowly faded away. She learned how to give him his medications, how to help him when he was too weak to stand, how to comfort him when the pain was too much. Emma, only 15 at the time, watched her father die slowly and her mother work herself to exhaustion. The girl grew up fast during those terrible months. When Tom finally passed away, Sarah thought the worst was over. She was wrong. The bills didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. The funeral costs added to the mountain of debt. The ranch, without Tom to run it, started falling apart. Sarah had never managed the cattle business alone. She tried her best, but it wasn't enough. Animals got sick. Equipment broke down. Fences needed repairs she couldn't afford. Sarah had to make hard choices. She sold most of the cattle, keeping only a few. She took a job at Miller's Diner in town, waitressing from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. The money wasn't much, but it helped. Then she added a second job, cleaning houses for wealthy families in the county. She worked from 3 until 7 most evenings. On weekends, she did bookkeeping for small businesses in town, staying up late into the night with their account books spread across her kitchen table. 3 jobs, 7 days a week. Sarah rarely had a day off. She was always tired, always worried, always trying to figure out how to make the money stretch just a little bit further. The electric bill, the truck payment, the property taxes, Emma's school supplies, groceries, the mortgage on the ranch. The list never ended. Emma was 17 now and about to graduate from high school. She was a smart girl, brilliant really. Her teachers said she could get into a good college if she applied. But college cost money, lots of money. Sarah lay awake at night wondering how she could possibly send her daughter to college when she could barely keep food on the table. Emma had started talking about skipping college and getting a job instead. That broke Sarah's heart more than anything. "Your father wanted you to go to college," Sarah told her daughter. "He saved money for years for your education." "Mom, that money is gone," Emma said gently. "We used it for Dad's treatment." "I understand. I can work and maybe go to community college part-time." But Sarah refused to accept that. Tom had dreamed of seeing his daughter graduate from college. Sarah would find a way to make that dream come true, even if it killed her. The people in Clearwater County knew Sarah's story. In a small town, everyone knew everything. They saw her working at the diner, always with a smile even when she was exhausted. They saw her truck, rusty and old, held together with prayers and duct tape. They knew about Tom's death and the debt it left behind. Some people pitied her. Others admired her strength. Sarah never complained. Not once. She never asked for help or charity. When people at church tried to take up a collection for her, she politely refused. "There are families who need it more than me," she said. "We're managing just fine." It wasn't true, but Sarah had her pride. Tom had always said, "Character is what you do when nobody's watching." Sarah lived by those words. She helped others whenever she could, even when she had nothing to spare. When old Mrs. Henderson broke her hip, Sarah brought her meals twice a week. When the Johnson family's house burned down, Sarah donated the little bit of money she had saved for Emma's prom dress. When the church needed volunteers for the food bank, Sarah showed up every Saturday morning before her shift at the diner. "Why do you help everyone else when you need help yourself?" Emma asked her mother once. Sarah smiled and touched her daughter's face. "Because that's what good people do, sweetheart. We help each other. Money comes and goes, but kindness lasts forever. Your father taught me that." Now, as Sarah finished her coffee in the early morning darkness, she looked at the calendar on the wall. June 15th. Emma's graduation was in 2 weeks. Property taxes were due in a month. The truck needed new tires. The refrigerator was making a strange noise that probably meant it would die soon. Sarah felt the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. But she straightened her back and lifted her chin. She had survived this long. She would keep surviving. For Emma. For Tom's memory. For herself. Sarah grabbed her purse and keys and headed out to her truck. Another day, another dollar, another step forward. That's all she could do. Keep moving forward, one day at a time. The sun was just starting to rise as Sarah drove down the long dirt driveway toward town. The morning sky was beautiful, painted in shades of pink and orange. It was going to be a hot day. The radio mentioned something about storms later in the week, but Sarah didn't pay much attention. She had work to do, bills to pay, and a daughter who deserved a better life than this constant struggle. Sarah Mitchell didn't know that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to change everything. She didn't know that within hours a tornado would tear through Clearwater County, and she certainly didn't know that helping a stranger in a parking lot would transform her entire life. For now, she was just a tired widow trying to survive, one waitress shift at a time. The diner was busy that Tuesday morning. Sarah moved between tables with practiced ease, carrying plates of eggs and bacon, refilling coffee cups, and smiling at the regular customers who came in every day. Her feet hurt in her old shoes, but she kept moving. Tips were good on busy mornings, and she needed every dollar. "More coffee, Sarah?" asked Mr. Peterson, a retired farmer who sat at the counter every morning at 7 o'clock sharp. "Coming right up," Sarah said cheerfully, grabbing the pot and topping off his cup. She liked Mr. Peterson. He always left a generous tip and asked about Emma. "How's that girl of yours doing? Graduation coming up soon, right?" 2 weeks, Sarah said with pride in her voice. She's excited and nervous at the same time. "Smart girl," Mr. Peterson nodded. Tom would be proud. Sarah felt the familiar sting of tears but blinked them away. Yes, he would be. The morning rush finally slowed down around noon. Sarah wiped down tables and refilled salt and pepper shakers. The diner's owner, Frank Miller, was a decent man who paid her fairly and didn't mind when she needed to leave early for her cleaning jobs. The television in the corner was on, showing the local news. The weatherman was talking about severe storms moving into the area. "Looks like we might get some rain tonight," Frank said, glancing at the TV. "We could use it," Sarah replied. "Everything's so dry this year." By 2 o'clock, Sarah clocked out and headed to her truck. The sky had changed. What had been bright and sunny that morning was now gray and heavy. The air felt thick and strange. Sarah noticed how quiet it was. No birds singing, no wind. Just an odd, heavy silence that made her uncomfortable. She had 3 houses to clean that afternoon. The first 2 went quickly. Sarah scrubbed bathrooms, vacuumed carpets, and dusted furniture in the big houses of people who could afford to pay someone else to do their cleaning. She never felt bitter about it. Work was work, and she was grateful to have it. By 5 o'clock, Sarah was finished and heading back to the diner to pick up her paycheck from Frank. The sky looked worse now. Dark clouds rolled across the horizon like a bruise spreading across the sky. The wind had picked up, blowing dust and leaves across the parking lot. Sarah's phone buzzed with a weather alert. "Severe thunderstorm warning for Clearwater County. Possible tornado activity," Seek shelter immediately. Sarah frowned at her phone. Tornado warnings were common in June, but they usually didn't amount to much. Still, she decided to grab her check quickly and head home to Emma. As she pulled into the diner parking lot, the tornado siren started wailing. The sound cut through the air like a scream, making Sarah's heart race. She jumped out of her truck and ran toward the diner. That's when she saw him. An older man stood next to an old pickup truck struggling with a jack. His truck had a flat tire and he was trying to change it. The wind was blowing harder now, whipping his gray hair around his face. He wore faded blue jeans, scuffed boots, and a tan cowboy hat that he kept having to hold on to as the wind tried to snatch it away. Sarah looked at the sky. It had turned a sick greenish color, the kind of color that meant serious danger. Debris was starting to fly through the air. A trash can rolled across the parking lot. Papers and leaves swirled around like a crazy dance. "Sir," Sarah shouted over the wind and sirens. "You need to leave that truck." The man looked up at her. He was probably in his 60s with a weathered face and kind blue eyes. "I've almost got it," he called back. "Just need another minute." "We don't have a minute." Sarah ran toward him. A piece of sheet metal flew past them, missing the man's head by inches. That seemed to convince him. He dropped the jack and looked around wildly. "Get in my truck." Sarah grabbed his arm and pulled him toward her vehicle. "Now." They ran together, fighting against the wind that seemed determined to knock them down. Sarah's truck rocked on its wheels from the force of the wind. They jumped inside and Sarah started the engine with shaking hands. The tornado sirens were deafening now. "Where's the nearest shelter?" the man asked, his voice urgent but calm. Sarah's mind raced. The diner had a small supply closet, but nothing that would protect them from a real tornado. Her house was 15 minutes away, too far. Then she remembered the old storm cellar behind Crawford's feed store just 2 blocks away. "Hold on," she said, and pressed the gas pedal. Driving was terrifying. The wind pushed the truck sideways. Rain started falling in sheets so heavy that the wipers couldn't keep up. Sarah could barely see the road. Tree branches flew through the air. A stop sign bent completely over, parallel to the ground. The man next to her gripped the door handle but didn't say a word. Sarah appreciated that he trusted her to get them to safety. Crawford's feed store appeared through the rain. Sarah drove around to the back where she knew the old storm cellar was located. Several other people had the same idea. She could see folks running toward the cellar doors. Sarah and the stranger jumped out of the truck and ran. The wind was incredible now, a physical force that tried to lift Sarah off her feet. The man grabbed her arm to steady her, and they stumbled together toward the cellar. Someone was holding the heavy doors open, shouting for people to hurry. Sarah and the stranger practically fell down the concrete steps into the darkness below. The cellar was crowded. Maybe 15 or 20 people had taken shelter there. Someone had a battery-powered lantern that cast shadows on the walls. The space smelled like dirt and mildew. Sarah could hear children crying and adults talking in worried voices. Above them, the wind roared like a freight train. "Is everyone okay?" a voice called out. It was Jim Crawford, the owner of the feed store. "Anyone hurt?" Sarah looked around. In the dim light, she could see frightened faces. Then she noticed the man she'd pulled from the parking lot. Blood was running down the side of his face from a cut on his forehead, dripping onto his shirt. "You're bleeding," Sarah said, touching his arm. The man reached up and felt his forehead, looking surprised when his fingers came away red. "Must have happened when that metal went flying past us." "Let me look at it." Sarah always kept a small first aid kit in her purse, a habit from taking care of Tom. She pulled out antiseptic wipes, gauze, and tape. "Sit down." The man sat on the concrete floor and Sarah knelt beside him. The cut wasn't deep, but head wounds always bled a lot. She cleaned it gently while the building above them shook from the wind. "Thank you," the man said quietly, "for stopping. Most people would have driven past." "I couldn't leave you there," Sarah said simply, pressing gauze to his forehead. "Hold this. I'm Jack," he said. Jack Drummond, Sarah Mitchell. She opened her purse again and pulled out a bottle of water, granola bars, and a small package of crackers. These were supposed to be her dinner and Emma's snack, but others needed them more. She handed the water to a young mother with 2 small children and gave the granola bars to an elderly couple huddled together. Jack watched her share her supplies. "You're very kind," Sarah shrugged. "We all help each other. That's what people do." The roar above them grew louder, and then there was a terrible crashing sound. The building was being hit hard. Sarah found herself praying silently, thinking of Emma at home. Her daughter knew to go to the bathroom at the center of the house if a tornado came. She would be okay. She had to be okay. The man named Jack sat quietly beside her. Despite the danger, there was something calm about him. He didn't panic or complain. When a little girl nearby started crying in fear, he smiled at her and made funny faces until she giggled. When an older woman started having trouble breathing from anxiety, he talked to her in a soothing voice until she calmed down. For 20 minutes, they waited in that cellar while the tornado passed over them. Sarah held the hand of a teenager who was shaking with fear. Jack kept the little girl entertained with stories about horses and ranches. The other people huddled together, strangers united by shared danger. Finally, the terrible roaring stopped. The wind died down to a normal level. The rain became gentle instead of violent. Jim Crawford carefully opened the cellar doors and climbed up to look around. "It's gone," he called down. "The tornado has passed. But folks, it's bad up here. Real bad." One by one, they climbed out of the cellar into a changed world. Sarah gasped at what she saw. The feed store was missing its entire roof. Cars in the parking lot were flipped over. Trees were snapped in half or uprooted completely. Power lines were down everywhere. In the distance, she could see that several buildings in town were destroyed. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Her truck had been moved about 20 feet and had a tree branch sticking through the windshield, but it was still in one piece. Jack stood beside her, looking at the destruction. "That was close. Too close," Sarah agreed. She pulled out her phone to call Emma, but there was no signal. "The cell towers must be down. I need to get home to my daughter." "Where do you live?" Jack asked. "About 10 miles out of town. The Mitchell Ranch." "I know it," Jack said, nodding. "I need to get to Clearwater Ranch. It's on the way to your place. Could I trouble you for a ride?" "My truck." He gestured to where his truck had been. It was now upside down with the flat tire pointing at the sky. Sarah looked at her own damaged truck. "I can try. The windshield is broken, but the engine might still work." They said goodbye to the others and walked to her truck. Sarah brushed broken glass off the seats. The drive through Clearwater County was like traveling through a war zone. Sarah drove slowly, carefully avoiding fallen trees, power lines, and debris scattered across the roads. The wind from the broken windshield blew through the truck cab, carrying the smell of rain and destruction. Beside her, Jack sat quietly looking at the damage with a serious expression. Houses were destroyed. Barns were flattened. Cars were tossed around like toys. Sarah saw people standing in their yards looking shocked and lost. She saw a woman sitting on what used to be her front porch, crying. A man was trying to move a fallen tree off his crushed car. Everywhere Sarah looked, she saw the tornado's path of destruction. "This is terrible," Sarah said softly. "So many people lost everything." "The county will come together," Jack said. "We always do. People here take care of each other." Sarah nodded. That was true. Clearwater County might be small and rural, but the people had big hearts. They would rebuild. They always did. She just hoped Emma was safe. Her daughter was smart and knew what to do during a tornado, but Sarah wouldn't feel better until she saw her with her own eyes. "Where exactly is Clearwater Ranch?" Sarah asked, navigating around a downed tree. "Take Highway 47 north. It's about 8 miles out. You'll see the sign." Sarah knew Highway 47. It was the road that led to the fancy part of the county where the big ranches were located. Tom used to drive past those ranches sometimes and joke about winning the lottery so they could live like rich folks. Sarah had always laughed and told him their little ranch was perfect just the way it was. As they drove, Jack asked her questions. Where was she from originally? How long had she lived in the county? What did she do for work? Sarah answered honestly, though she kept the details brief. She was from Kansas, had moved here when she married Tom 20 years ago and worked at the diner. She didn't mention the other 2 jobs or the mountain of debt or the struggle to survive. That was private. "And your daughter?" Jack asked. "You mentioned her." "Emma," Sarah said, and her voice softened the way it always did when she talked about her girl. "She's 17, graduating in 2 weeks, smart as a whip and twice as determined. She's going to do great things." "I'm sure she will," Jack said warmly. "She has a brave mother. Not many people would have stopped to help a stranger during a tornado warning." Sarah shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Jack said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Trust me on that." They reached Highway 47 and turned north. The tornado hadn't hit this area as hard, though there was still damage. After several miles, Sarah saw a large wooden sign that read, Clearwater Ranch in carved letters. The entrance was marked by 2 massive stone pillars and a metal gate that stood open. "Turn here," Jack said. Sarah turned onto a long driveway paved with smooth asphalt, not dirt like her own driveway. Tall oak trees lined both sides, their branches meeting overhead to form a green tunnel. The driveway seemed to go on forever. Sarah's little ranch could fit inside this driveway 3 times over. "You must work pretty high up at this ranch," Sarah said, impressed by the obvious wealth. "This place is huge." Jack made a strange sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Yeah, you could say I'm involved in the operations." The driveway opened up to reveal a sight that made Sarah's breath catch. The main house was enormous, a beautiful 2-story structure made of stone and wood with a wraparound porch and multiple chimneys. It looked like something from a magazine about luxury homes. Beyond the house, she could see massive barns, several smaller buildings, and pastures that stretched as far as she could see. Hundreds of cattle grazed peacefully, unbothered by the recent tornado. "Wow," Sarah whispered. "This place is incredible. I've heard about Clearwater Ranch my whole time living here, but I've never seen it up close." As Sarah pulled up to the main house, people came running from every direction. Ranch hands in dusty jeans and work shirts, an older woman in an apron, a man in a suit, and several others all rushed toward the truck. But they weren't looking at Sarah, they were looking at Jack. "Mr. Drummond," shouted a tall man with a gray mustache. "Thank God you're safe. We've been trying to reach you for hours." "Mr. Drummond, are you hurt?" the woman in the apron asked, noticing the bandage on his forehead. "Sir, the south pasture fence is down and we've got cattle scattered everywhere," said a young ranch hand. "And the roof on barn 3 is damaged." Sarah sat in her truck, confused. Mr. Drummond? Why were they calling Jack that? And why were they treating him like he was the boss? She watched as Jack climbed out of the truck, and everyone gathered around him like he was the most important person in the world. Jack turned back to Sarah and smiled, that same gentle smile he'd had in the storm cellar. "Sarah, could you give me a moment? Then I'd like you to come inside for some coffee. It's the least I can do after you saved my life." "Oh, that's not necessary," Sarah said quickly. "I should get home to Emma. I'm sure you have a lot to deal with here." "Please," Jack said. "Just for a few minutes." "I insist." The way he said it made Sarah realize that this wasn't just a request. This was a man used to getting what he wanted. Sarah climbed out of her truck, suddenly very aware of her stained waitress uniform and messy hair. She probably looked like a disaster after the tornado in the storm cellar. The man with the gray mustache approached her. "Ma'am, I'm Robert Hayes, the ranch foreman. We're so grateful you brought Mr. Drummond home safely. The whole county has been worried sick about him." "I don't understand," Sarah said. "Why would the whole county be worried?" "Who exactly is Jack?" Robert looked surprised. "You don't know?" "This is Jack Drummond. He owns Clearwater Ranch. He owns half the commercial property in town, too. This is one of the largest ranch operations in the state." Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Jack Drummond. The Jack Drummond. Everyone in Clearwater County knew that name. The Drummond family had built this county. They'd been here for 3 generations, owning land, creating jobs, and supporting local businesses. Jack Drummond was basically royalty in this part of the world, and she had treated him like any regular person. She'd ordered him around in the parking lot. She'd made him sit on a dirty cellar floor. She'd given him a granola bar that was supposed to be her dinner. Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment. Jack had been talking to his ranch foreman about the damage, but he looked over and saw Sarah's expression. He excused himself and walked back to her. "Sarah, are you okay? You look pale." "I didn't know," Sarah stammered. "I had no idea who you were. I'm so sorry. I should have been more respectful. I thought you were a regular person?" Jack finished for her, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I am a regular person, Sarah. Just one who happens to own some land and cattle. That doesn't change what happened today. You risked your life to help someone you thought was just an ordinary stranger. That matters more than any title or property. But Sarah didn't know what to say. She felt completely out of place standing in front of this massive house in her stained uniform with broken glass in her hair. "Come inside," Jack said gently. "Please, just for a few minutes. Let me thank you properly." The woman in the apron appeared at Jack's elbow. "Mr. Drummond, you should let me clean that cut properly. And you need to change clothes." You're soaked and covered in dirt." "In a minute, Margaret," Jack said. "First, I need to make sure my rescuer gets some proper hospitality." Sarah wanted to refuse. She wanted to jump in her truck and drive home and forget about this embarrassing situation. But something in Jack's kind eyes made her nod. "Okay, just for a minute. Then I really need to check on Emma." They walked up the stone steps to the front porch. The front door was solid wood with etched glass panels. Inside, the house was even more impressive. High ceilings, wooden beams, leather furniture, and Western art on the walls. Everything looked expensive but comfortable, like a place where people actually lived, not just a showpiece. Margaret, the woman in the apron, rushed off to get coffee. Jack gestured for Sarah to sit in the living room, but she hesitated. "I'm all dirty from the storm cellar," Sarah said. "I don't want to ruin your furniture." "Furniture can be cleaned," Jack said firmly. "Sit, please." Sarah perched nervously on the edge of a leather chair. Jack sat across from her, looking completely relaxed despite the crazy afternoon they'd just survived. Margaret appeared with coffee in delicate china cups that Sarah was afraid to touch. "I need to be honest with you, Sarah," Jack said, sipping his coffee. "I wasn't completely truthful earlier. I didn't introduce myself properly because I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you didn't know who I was. In my position, people often act differently around me. They want something. Or they're too respectful, or they're intimidated, but you just treated me like a regular person who needed help." That meant a lot. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. She took a small sip of coffee, which was better than any coffee she'd ever tasted. "I'm going to ask Robert to do some research on you," Jack continued. "I hope you don't mind. In a small county like this, everyone knows everyone's story." "I want to know yours. Why?" Sarah asked, confused. "I'm nobody special. Just a waitress who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "I don't think you're nobody special," Jack said seriously. Sarah drove home as fast as her damaged truck would allow. The broken windshield made driving dangerous, but she didn't care. She needed to see Emma and make sure her daughter was safe. The sun was setting, painting the tornado-damaged county in shades of orange and red. It would have been beautiful if Sarah wasn't so worried. When she finally pulled into her driveway, Emma came running out of the house. The girl threw herself into her mother's arms, both of them crying with relief. "Mom! I was so scared. I tried to call you 100 times, but the phones aren't working." "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay." Sarah held her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Were you safe? Did you go to the bathroom like I taught you?" "Yes, I sat in the bathtub with blankets and pillows over my head. The tornado didn't hit us directly, but I could hear it. It was so loud, Mom, so loud." They went inside together and Sarah inspected the house. Some shingles were missing from the roof and one window had cracked. But overall, they'd been lucky. Very lucky. The barn had lost more of its roof and several fence posts were down, but those could be fixed. Eventually. When she had money. Which she didn't. That night, Sarah and Emma ate canned soup by candlelight because the power was out. They talked about the tornado and how scary it had been. Sarah told Emma about helping the stranger in the parking lot, though she didn't mention who that stranger turned out to be. It all felt too strange and unreal. The next day, Sarah went to work at the diner even though Miller's had no roof. Frank was there with a tarp stretched over part of the building, determined to keep serving the community. People needed hot coffee and a place to gather after a disaster. Sarah worked her shift, listening to stories about the tornado. 3 people had died in the county and dozens were injured. Hundreds of homes and buildings were damaged or destroyed. Sarah felt guilty for having been so lucky. Her house was mostly fine. Emma was safe. They had food and water. So many others had lost everything. At the end of her shift, Frank told her the diner would be closed for repairs starting tomorrow. "I'll still pay you for your regular hours," Frank said kindly. "But it might be a couple of weeks before we can open again." Sarah thanked him, trying not to show her panic. She needed that income. Without the diner job, she wouldn't be able to pay this month's bills. But Frank had his own problems to deal with. She would figure something out. She always did. 2 days after the tornado, Sarah was doing laundry when she heard vehicles coming up her driveway. Lots of vehicles. She walked to the front window and saw a convoy of trucks pulling onto her property. Big trucks pulling trailers. Behind them came more trucks and vans. Sarah counted at least 10 vehicles. Emma came to stand beside her mother. "Mom, who are all these people?" "I have no idea." They went outside together. A man climbed out of the lead truck wearing work clothes and a hard hat. Behind him, dozens of people emerged from the other vehicles. Construction workers, Sarah realized. They were carrying tools and equipment. Then another truck pulled up and Jack Drummond climbed out. He was wearing jeans and a blue button-up shirt, and he smiled when he saw Sarah's confused face. "Good morning, Sarah." "Jack, what's going on? What are all these people doing here?" Jack walked up to her porch, his expression kind but serious. "I told you I was going to do some research. I asked around about you. In a small county, people talk. I learned about your late husband, Tom. I learned about the medical debt and how hard you've been working to keep this place running. I learned that you work 3 jobs and never complain. I learned that you help everyone else even when you can barely help yourself." Sarah felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. "That's private. That's my business. You saved my life," Jack said simply. "In that parking lot during the tornado warning, you risked everything to help a stranger. You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything in return. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. Do you know how rare that is?" "Anyone would have done the same," Sarah repeated her standard answer. "No, they wouldn't have," Jack said firmly. "I've lived 63 years on this earth, Sarah Mitchell. I've met a lot of people. Most would have driven right past. Most would have saved themselves. But you stopped. And then in that storm cellar, you gave away your own food and water to others. You took care of my cut. You comforted scared strangers. You have a good heart." Sarah didn't know what to say. Emma stood beside her, looking confused and amazed at the same time. "My wife Ruth died 5 years ago," Jack continued, his voice softer now. "Cancer, like your Tom. Before she passed, she made me promise something. She said I had too much money and not enough purpose. She said I needed to pay attention to the good people in this world and help them, not because they asked for it, but because they deserved it. She said people like that were drowning while people like us sat on resources we couldn't spend in 3 lifetimes. Jack, I don't need charity," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "I appreciate the thought, but this isn't charity," Jack interrupted. "This is gratitude. This is me keeping a promise to my wife. This is me trying to be the kind of man Ruth wanted me to be. Please, Sarah, let me do this." "Do what exactly?" Sarah asked, though part of her was afraid of the answer. Jack gestured to the trucks and people. "My construction crew is going to fix your ranch. New roof on the barn, fixed and painted house, replaced fences, repaired driveway. Everything that needs doing, we're going to do it." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "I can't accept that." "It's too much. There's more," Jack said gently. "I talked to Anderson's feed store. They're delivering new cattle tomorrow. Not a huge herd, just enough to get your ranch operation running again. Good breeding stock that will help you build a sustainable business." "Jack, no. I can't." Sarah was crying now, unable to hold back the tears. Emma wrapped her arms around her mother. The girl was crying too. "And one more thing," Jack said. "I run a charitable foundation called the Drummond County Initiative. It helps struggling families in the area. We need an operations manager, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, someone who knows how to work hard, someone with compassion. I'd like to offer you that job, Sarah. The salary is $60,000 a year." Sarah actually gasped. $60,000? That was more than she made at all 3 jobs combined. That was more money than she'd ever imagined earning. "I don't have experience managing anything," Sarah said through her tears. "I'm just a waitress and a house cleaner." "You're a mother who's been managing an impossible situation for 2 years," Jack corrected. "You're a woman who's been juggling 3 jobs and a ranch and raising a daughter alone. You're a person who helps others even when you have nothing to spare. That's exactly the kind of experience I need. Someone who understands what families are going through. Someone who won't judge them or look down on them. Someone who will treat them with dignity." Sarah looked at Emma, who was staring at Jack Drummond like he was some kind of angel sent from heaven. Then Sarah looked at her rundown ranch, at the barn with holes in the roof, at the fences held together with wire and hope. She thought about the bills stacked on her kitchen table. She thought about Emma's college dreams. "Why?" Sarah whispered. "Why would you do all this for me?" Jack smiled sadly. "Because 5 years ago I promised my dying wife that I would be a better man. I promised I would use our wealth to help good people who deserve a chance. And because yesterday in a parking lot during a tornado warning, you reminded me what real character looks like. You are what Ruth wanted me to find, Sarah. Good people doing good things without expecting anything in return." "I don't know what to say." Sarah admitted. Say yes, Emma said suddenly. Mom, say yes, please, Jack nodded. Listen to your smart daughter. Let me do this. Not just for you, but for me too. I need to keep my promise to Ruth. You're helping me do that. Sarah looked around at all the workers waiting patiently for the conversation to end so they could start their work. She looked at Jack's kind, honest face. She thought about Tom and what he would want for her and Emma. She thought about the last 2 years of barely surviving, of constant worry of never having enough. Okay, Sarah said finally, her voice shaking. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Jack's smile lit up his whole face. No, Sarah, thank you. You saved my life and now you're helping me honor my wife's memory. We're even. For the next week, Sarah's ranch was transformed. The construction crew worked from dawn to dusk. They tore off the old barn roof and put on a new one. They painted the house inside and out. They fixed every broken fence on the entire property. They repaired the driveway. They even fixed small things Sarah hadn't mentioned, like the leaking bathroom sink and the broken porch step. The cattle arrived as promised. Beautiful, healthy animals that would form the foundation of a real ranching operation. Jack sent one of his experienced ranch hands to teach Sarah the basics of cattle management. The man was patient and kind, treating Sarah like a colleague instead of a charity case. And then Jack took Sarah to meet the staff at the Drummond County Initiative. The foundation office was in town, in a nice building that Jack owned. There were 5 other employees, all friendly and welcoming. They showed Sarah the files of families they were currently helping. 6 months passed like a dream. Sarah could hardly believe how much her life had changed. Every morning she woke up in her renovated house without the sick feeling of worry in her stomach. The bills were paid. The refrigerator was full. Emma was thriving. The ranch was running smoothly with the new cattle herd and repaired facilities. And most importantly, Sarah was doing work that mattered. The Drummond County Initiative had helped 37 families in those 6 months. Sarah had reviewed every application, met with every family, and helped determine the best way to support them. She never forgot what it felt like to be on the other side, desperate for help but too proud to ask. She treated every family with respect and kindness, making sure they understood that accepting help wasn't weakness but wisdom. There was the Johnson family, whose house had burned down in a fire. The foundation helped them rebuild and furnish the new house completely. There was Maria Santos, a single mother who'd lost her job when the factory closed. The foundation paid her rent for 6 months while she went to nursing school and found a better career. There was elderly Mr. Chen, who couldn't afford his heart medications. The foundation covered his medical costs and helped him apply for better insurance. Every family had a story. Every family had dignity. Every family deserved help. Sarah poured her heart into this work, and it filled her up in ways she'd never expected. She finally understood what Jack had meant about purpose. This wasn't just a job. This was her calling. Emma graduated from high school with honors in June. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. Sarah sat in the audience and cried happy tears as her daughter walked across the stage. After the ceremony, Jack came over to congratulate Emma. So, have you decided on a college yet? Jack asked the girl. Emma's smile faded a little. I got accepted to State University. It's a good school. I'm excited. State University is excellent, Jack agreed. But I heard you also got accepted to Princeton. Is that right? Emma looked at her shoes. Yes, but Princeton is really expensive. State University is more practical. Jack looked at Sarah, who shook her head slightly. They'd talked about this. Emma had gotten into an Ivy League school, one of the best universities in the country. But even with financial aid, it would cost money they didn't have. Sarah's new salary was good, but not good enough for Princeton. Emma, Jack said gently, can I tell you something? My wife Ruth always said that investing in education was investing in the future. The Drummond Foundation has a scholarship program for exceptional students from Clearwater County. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to Princeton, including room, board, books, and living expenses. Emma's mouth dropped open. What? No, I can't. That's too much. You earned it, Jack said firmly. You're a brilliant young woman with a bright future. Ruth would have loved to meet you. She would have insisted on helping you. Please let us do this. Sarah was crying again. She seemed to cry a lot these days, but they were happy tears. Emma, baby, if you want to go to Princeton, you should go. Don't worry about the money. Emma looked between her mother and Jack, tears streaming down her own face. Are you sure? I'm sure, Jack said. You're going to do great things, Emma Mitchell. The world needs smart, compassionate people like you. Emma threw her arms around Jack, hugging him tight. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you so much. Over those 6 months, Jack became like family. He came to dinner at Sarah's house once a week, usually bringing dessert or wine. He taught Emma about managing money and helped her prepare for college. He told them stories about his late wife Ruth and his years building the ranch. He listened to Sarah's stories about Tom and the good years before the cancer. Sarah learned that Jack was lonely. For all his wealth and property, he lived in that big house mostly alone. His children were grown and lived in other states. His wife was gone. The ranch kept him busy, but it didn't keep him company. Having dinner with Sarah and Emma seemed to make him happy in a way that money couldn't. In August, Emma left for Princeton. Sarah drove her daughter across the country, helping her move into her dorm room. It was hard to say goodbye, but Sarah was so proud she thought her heart might burst. Her daughter was going to one of the best schools in the world. Tom would have been so proud. When Sarah got back to Clearwater County, the foundation was busier than ever. The tornado had damaged so many homes and businesses, and recovery was slow. Sarah worked long hours, but she loved every minute of it. She created new programs to help with tornado recovery. She organized volunteers. She reached out to families who were too proud or scared to ask for help. One of those families was the Hendersons, an older couple whose farm had been destroyed in the tornado. Sarah visited them personally, remembering how Mrs. Henderson had broken her hip years ago and Sarah had brought her meals. Now it was time to return that kindness on a larger scale. The foundation helped the Hendersons rebuild their barn and replace their lost equipment. When Sarah told them the foundation would help them, Mr. Henderson cried. "We didn't think anyone remembered us," he said. "We thought we were too old, too unimportant." "You're not unimportant," Sarah said firmly. "Everyone matters. Everyone deserves help." In September, the Drummond County Initiative held its first annual fundraiser. It was a big event at Jack's ranch with music, food, and dancing. People from all over the county came. Rich people, poor people, farmers, business owners, everyone mixed together under the stars. Jack gave a speech that night that Sarah would never forget. He stood on a small stage with the microphone and looked out at the crowd of 200 people. 5 years ago, I lost my wife Ruth to cancer, Jack began. Before she died, she made me promise to be a better man. She said I had too much money and not enough purpose. She was right, as she usually was. I didn't know how to keep that promise until 6 months ago when a tornado hit our county. Jack looked at Sarah, who was standing at the side of the stage. On that terrible day, I was stuck in a parking lot with a flat tire. I was in danger and I knew it. But I was stubborn, trying to fix the tire myself. Then this woman pulled up in her truck and ordered me to get in. She didn't ask politely. She grabbed my arm and dragged me to safety. She drove me to a storm cellar while the tornado bore down on us. She bandaged my head when I was bleeding. She gave away her own food and water to strangers. She did all of this not knowing who I was, not expecting anything in return. Sarah felt her face get hot as everyone turned to look at her. That woman was Sarah Mitchell, Jack continued. A widow who was struggling to survive, working 3 jobs, drowning in debt, trying to save a failing ranch and send her daughter to college. She had every reason to drive right past me that day. She had every reason to save herself and let the stranger figure it out. But that's not who Sarah is. She stopped because she saw someone who needed help, and helping others is just what she does. Jack's voice got thick with emotion. Sarah reminded me what real character looks like. She reminded me of my promise to Ruth. She showed me what it means to be a good person when nobody's watching. So I want to say thank you, Sarah Mitchell. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for helping me keep my promise. Thank you for showing this county what true kindness looks like. The crowd erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, cheering. Sarah wanted to hide, but Jack gestured for her to come up on stage. Emma, home for fall break, pushed her mother forward. Sarah walked up the steps on shaking legs. Jack handed her the microphone. Sarah looked out at all those faces, all those people. She saw families she'd helped through the foundation. She saw her neighbors and coworkers. She saw people who'd known Tom. She saw her community. I don't know what to say, Sarah began, her voice shaking. I'm not special. I just did what anyone should do. When someone needs help, you help them. That's all. But not everyone does help, called out a voice from the crowd. It was Maria Santos, the single mother Sarah had helped get through nursing school. You helped me when I had nothing. You treated me with respect. You changed my life. You helped us rebuild," called Mr. Henderson. "You gave us hope." More voices joined in, people sharing stories of how Sarah and the foundation had helped them. Sarah stood on that stage, tears running down her face, overwhelmed by the love and gratitude. When the crowd finally quieted down, Sarah took a deep breath. "My husband Tom used to say that character is what you do when nobody's watching." He lived by those words every day of his life. When he died, I thought I lost everything. I thought my life was over. I was drowning in debt and worry and fear, but I kept going because I had a daughter who needed me, and because giving up isn't what Tom would have wanted. Sarah looked at Jack, who was wiping his own eyes. 6 months ago, I helped a stranger in a parking lot. I never expected anything in return. That's not why you help people. But that stranger turned out to be Jack Drummond, and he gave me back my life. Not just with money and repairs and a job, though those things saved me. He gave me purpose. He showed me that kindness creates ripples we can't imagine. One small act of helping someone led to all of this. It led to 37 families being helped. It led to my daughter going to Princeton. It led to a community coming together. Sarah looked out at the crowd again. "So if there's one thing I want everyone here to remember,